Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me for some highlights of Budget 2021, which will also serve as the 2020-21 third quarter fiscal update. It's been almost a full year since history handed our province three of the greatest challenges it's ever seen: the largest global economic recession since the Great Depression, an unprecedented drop in energy prices, and the COVID-19 pandemic. These events combined to hit Alberta's finances and a resource-based economy much harder than some other jurisdictions, and the province is still grappling with the impacts. Budget 2021 was developed in response to our challenges. It's a plan that will see Alberta past its current crisis by focusing on what matters most. Budget 2021 is founded on these three main themes: ensuring healthcare is resourced to deal with the pandemic, positioning the economy for recovery, and ensuring that we're delivering government services most efficiently. The key fiscal metrics for the 2020-2021 Q3 forecast, and I want to state that this forecast is for the current fiscal year that we're in today. So this is for the fiscal year that ends in 5 weeks, on March 31st, 2021. Revenues are projected to be $42.3 billion. That's $900 higher from our mid-year forecast. Non-COVID-related operating expenses are forecast to be $47.3 billion. That's $500 million lower than we predicted in budget. In terms of our COVID costs and economic recovery costs, we're expecting those to come to $5.8 billion. And again, that relates to two things: both our health care response as well as our response for economic recovery. $2 billion relates to health and personal protective equipment, and $3.8 billion relates to economic relief and recovery. We're projecting a $20.2 billion deficit, down from a $21.3 billion deficit in mid-year, and down from a $24.2 billion deficit that we forecast in Q1. Now I want to turn our attention to our upcoming budget year. In 21-22, we will continue to focus on fighting the pandemic and economic recovery. We're expecting a modest increase in revenues, an approximate increase of $1 billion in operating expenses, which will include an increase of $900 million for health. Other expenses are expected to increase by $800 million. This is due to a $400 million increase in debt servicing costs and a $400 million increase in capital grants. On the economic recovery side, we're projecting a $1.1 billion spend to ensure that we can provide economic relief for businesses and to ensure that our sector strategies are properly funded and resourced. We are also setting up a $1.3 billion contingency for health, and that will ensure that we can continue to resource our healthcare effort in the face of a pandemic. We're projecting a deficit of $18.2 billion for the upcoming fiscal year. The out-year revenues are modestly improving. They're improving by just under 8% per year. And with operating expenses remaining largely flat, our deficits will be reducing. We're projecting an $11 billion deficit and an $8 billion deficit in 23-24. And I want to state one thing: there are no new taxes or tax increases in Budget 2021. In terms of health care, adequately resourcing health care is our #1 priority in Budget 2021. The Department of Health's operating budget has increased by $900 million, or 4%, from the last budget to $21.4 billion. This increases to $23 billion if amortization and inventory consumption is included. And I want to say that this increase is going to be reflected in each of the fiscal years for the duration of the fiscal plan. This funding is required largely to reduce a backlog in surgical wait times, as well as the delayed implementation of a number of AHS recommendations, and these were delays due to the pandemic. Over $3.5 billion will go towards continuing care, community care, and home care programs, an increase of over $200 million from the 2020-21 forecast. The Budget 2021 investment in healthcare continues our commitment of $140 million over 4 years to improve and increase access to mental health supports, which will be so important following the pandemic. and we're setting aside $1.25 billion specifically to fight COVID-19. Alberta's government will also spend $143 million building new healthcare facilities over the next 3 years. This includes $35 million for the new Lacrete Maternity and Community Health Centre. The centre will provide integrated ambulatory care, primary care, maternal health care, and diagnostic services to Lacrete and remote communities in the area. Let's go to the next slide. Economic recovery is a critical priority in Budget 2021. In 21-22, Alberta's government will spend an additional $3.1 billion to support that recovery. This will include $1.5 billion over 3 years on strategic investments in key economic sectors. This funding supports job creators directly affected by the public health measures, supports job training and skills development, which will be so important in economic recovery, and it funds specific sector strategies such as technology, tourism, aviation, aerospace and pharmaceuticals, energy, financial technology, and agriculture. To help ensure Alberta can address any new challenges in the upcoming year, the government has set aside an additional $500 million for further economic recovery initiatives and to fund sector strategies that are currently being developed. The government has also added $1.7 billion to the capital plan for 21-22, and this is over and above what was committed in Budget 2020. Let's turn to slide 6 on the capital plan. The capital plan remains a key element of the government's recovery strategy. In total, the 3-year plan amounts to $20.7 billion, which is an increase of $1.7 billion from 21-22. This funding will support more than 50,000 direct and 40,000 indirect jobs through to 2024. Municipal support accounts for the largest portion of the capital plan at 33% or $5.9 billion. Capital maintenance and renewal makes up the next largest portion with $3 billion over the course of the plan. That's an increase of nearly $300 million from Budget 2020. The substantial investment will support jobs immediately while building the roads, bridges, hospitals, schools, and other public infrastructure that are so important in our communities and to the job creators who move to these communities. At the same time, it also minimizes the need for more costly repairs or replacement infrastructure in the future. I do want to say that our capital plan is critical to economic recovery. We are really looking to prioritize projects that will improve our competitiveness and productivity, projects that will attract additional private sector investment and position Alberta's economy for long-term recovery and growth. I want to turn to the next slide, which is fiscal anchors. In Budget 2019, we presented a credible fiscal plan, a plan that got us to balance in our first term. Unfortunately, COVID and the economic fallout has significantly disrupted this plan. And during this time, when we're unable to project a timeline and path to balance, fiscal anchors will be very important to inform our financial decisions and ensure that we're positioned for fiscal recovery in the future. Our number one fiscal anchor is to ensure that the government can live up to its commitment to keep Alberta's net debt to a GDP ratio below 30%. By the end of this 3-year plan, the ratio will be 26.4%. Measuring net debt to GDP is a reliable way to calculate Alberta's ability to pay back its debt. Second, the government is determined to deliver services most cost-effectively, given that the McKinnon panel pointed out that Alberta has historically spent more than other provinces. And third, the government remains committed to balancing the budget. We will set a clear time frame for getting back to balance once the pandemic is over and we have economic clarity. Let's turn to the next slide. A key fiscal anchor is aligning our per capita spending with that of major provinces. Budget 2021 will bring Alberta's spending levels in line with that of Canada's largest provinces, moving us into an even better position for success as the economy begins to recover. Major undertaking to put the province under a sustainable fiscal trajectory is really the purpose of this fiscal anchor. Let's turn to the next slide. We live in a world of much economic uncertainty. This past year has demonstrated the amount of uncertainty a province could face. With the recent run in energy prices, I want to be transparent with Albertans on both a low and high scenario. A number of assumptions are interrelated, including our WTI price, oil price differential, and exchange rates. And let me talk a little bit about that. When energy prices rise, typically or historically are differential. The differential between the value of Western Canadian Select and West Texas Intermediate oil prices change. So that has to be factored in any kind of projection as well. When energy prices rise, typically our currency rises with it. And that has the opposite effect for Alberta government revenues. So we have significant interrelationship in a number of our fiscal metrics. In Budget 2021, we forecasted a WTI to be $46. That leaves us with an $18.2 billion deficit when we run all of the modeling based on a $46 WTI price. We presented in this fiscal plan a low scenario, a scenario where WTI is $39. That results, again, after all of the modeling, in a $20.1 billion deficit. And I want to talk about a high scenario as well. We're projecting a high scenario of $55 WTI to result in a $15.4 billion deficit. Now, while a variable WTI price will affect the deficit, it will not affect our priorities or decisions in Budget 2021. We're focused on what we can manage, and we are looking to ensure that we're prioritizing healthcare spending. We're looking to ensure that we're positioning the economy for growth and recovery, and we're looking to ensure that we're delivering government services most efficiently. As vaccines roll out, optimism and economic projections are improving. The recent increase in energy prices are a case in point. In 2020, GDP fell by an estimated 7.8%, and in 2021, real GDP is expected to grow by 4.8%, and then 3.7, 3.3, and 3.1 in the out years. Oil production, which reached record highs in late 2020 on the back of a strong rebound in bitumen output, is expected to lead growth this year. Ultimately, Alberta's economy is now expected to reach pre-COVID levels by 2022, 1 year earlier than expected in mid-year. Albertans continue to face one of the most difficult times in our history. Right now, this government is focused on our three key priorities, and Budget 2021 reflects those priorities. Number one, we're ensuring that we're resourcing our healthcare response adequately to meet the pandemic challenge. Number two, we're positioning the economy for growth and a rebound. And number three, we're constantly working to ensure we're delivering government services most efficiently. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
So now we will be going to the phones for questions. Just to get to as many individuals as possible, we'll just ask that you keep your questions brief. Operator, can you please put through our first caller?
Thank you. The first question is from Rick Bell, Calgary Sun.
Good afternoon, Minister. If you go to slide 8, which is the per capita, the expense comparison between the provinces, it looks like here around 2022-23, meaning next year, sort of, the next budget after this budget, it looks like the lines cross so that basically the per capita expense is about the same as it is in Ontario, Quebec, and BC. If that is the case, we will still have a considerable deficit projected for that year. So what gives at that point? Because you were talking earlier about not considering other options until we get the spending in line. Well, it looks like budget 22-23 is when that happens. But the projected deficit for that year is still in the many billions. So what happens then? And when I'm talking about things like taxation and other matters, what happens at that point?
Well, Rick, you're right. We are expecting, based on the fiscal plan, to begin to see Alberta's expenditures on a per capita basis align with the other large provinces in 22-23, and in getting right into the middle of that range by 23-24. And I believe that's job number one as we look to position this province for fiscal recovery. And that's what we're focused on right now. We're focused on, again, the task at hand, resourcing health in the short term to meet the challenges of a pandemic, positioning the province for economic recovery and growth, which is also critical if we're going to see a fiscal recovery in the province. And then in the intermediate and long term, continuing down the track that we laid out in Budget 2019, and that is to, over time, over the course of our fiscal plan, bring our costs in line on a per capita basis with that of other provinces. So that's what we're focused on at this point in time, and I believe those should be our priorities.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Thank you. Yes. Emma Graney, Globe and Mail.
Yeah, g'day, Minister. Just further to Rick's question there on the $8 billion shortfall in Year 3, can you actually see any way to fill that gap without finding new sources of revenue, for example, taxes? And, can you give us any more ideas on timeline of that review and what they'll be looking at? But just on the energy front, in this budget you've included a thwack of stuff about oil, GHG emissions, and you're creating an ESG secretariat. So why is Alberta suddenly focusing on ESGs in a very substantial way as opposed to treating them like the quote-unquote flavour of the month, as Premier Kenny said back in 2019? Thanks.
Well, thanks for that, Emma. Environmental and social governance issues and factors are critically important to our energy industry participants in this province. And that's a critically important effort for Alberta as a whole. As you know, capital markets are very sensitive to progress on environmental and social and governance issues. And Alberta has a great story to tell. It's a story that hasn't fully been told in the investment community in North America and globally. And we think right now it's critically important that story is told very well. As you know, in the last decade, we've seen the GHG emissions intensity drop by over 20% in a barrel of crude oil from the province. And many companies have plans to further reduce their greenhouse gas intensity by a further 20 to 25% in the upcoming decade. It's important that we continue to tell that story. It's important that we hold entities to account who unfairly view Alberta's ESG story relative to defensible data-driven metrics. And so that will be an important effort. And it has been an important effort. It remains and is an even more important effort going forward. With respect to your question around a perceived shortfall by 23-24, at that point in time, I believe that there will be additional clarity, and we can work to understand what more needs to be done. I think, again, job number one, after resourcing health for the pandemic, after positioning the province for economic recovery, is to thoughtfully and carefully continue with the plan we laid out in Budget 2019, and that is to deliver government services more efficiently. And of course, we use the metric as aligning with, on a per capita basis, the spend of other large provinces. And so when we get to 23-24, I believe we'll have more clarity on where we're sitting economically, and then we can make appropriate decisions.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Thank you. Julia Wong, Global News.
Hi, Minister. The budget indicates the province will continue on the path of cost-cutting after mass vaccinations are done. So what is the specific plan, and how soon do you see it being executed after vaccinations are completed?
All right. Well, firstly, I don't agree. We're not on a path of cost-cutting. We're on a path of delivering government services most efficiently. And I believe every government should be constantly evaluating programs, service delivery methodology to ensure that we're providing taxpayers with best value. And a case in point is in our healthcare budget. We're increasing our base budget this year by $900 million. That's over and above our $1.3 billion health contingency that we're setting aside for COVID. The increase in the base budget is going to be there for every year in the fiscal plan. And so at the same time, we're going to be working at increasing our efficiency, The Minister of Health, Minister Chandra, will be continuing to implement a number of the recommendations that came from the Ernst & Young report with respect to HS. I believe that governments have a constant responsibility for improvement.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Thank you. Chris Epp, CTV Calgary.
Thank you, Minister. I just think to last year where you were criticized for having somewhat of an overly optimistic, rosy approach to the budget and projected oil prices, and this year almost seems the opposite. The government's almost being overly cautious in all its projections. Maybe explain why that is, if you're just worried about getting burnt on this. And then one point of clarification, I'm not familiar with this institute at U of A where you're giving money for vaccine development, but I'm curious how much of a priority that will now be for the province to develop that industry here.
Sure, absolutely. Well, firstly, with respect to energy price projections, here's the reality. Energy prices come with a lot of volatility, and last year's budget was a great case in point. We had very credible and defensible projections for our energy prices. But what happened, of course, the pandemic started taking hold. We, at the same time, had an energy price war between OPEC plus countries, and that created in really what an energy price collapse that couldn't be predicted. This year, we're also, as you pointed out, seeing the opposite effect. And again, our economic assumptions that are ultimately resulting in our revenue projections are very conservative this year. We're projecting $46 for WTI, and the reality is there's an awful lot of uncertainty yet. And in an environment such as this, I believe it's important to be prudent and to be conservative in the projections. Listen, I would love to be surprised with much higher energy prices than what we're predicting. But I think the prudent, responsible approach is to be conservative in our projections. In terms of funding vaccine development in the province, obviously that's a very important priority wherever that can take place. And we're funding the Laikai Shai group at the University of Alberta $5 million over the next 4 years, so a total of $20 million. That will be important funding. We also are building out a sector strategy around pharmaceuticals and health sciences. We really believe that Alberta has a competitive advantage in that space, and so stay tuned for the full rollout of that strategy. That strategy will certainly look to understand our vaccine production capability in the province.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Thank you. Jeffrey Morgan, Financial Post.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for taking my question. This budget shows debt servicing costs have reached an all-time high and are actually higher than non-renewable resource revenues this year and corporate income tax revenues for the next several years. So, given that servicing the debt is higher than these sources of revenue, is that a signal that the province needs more revenue or needs new sources of revenue? And if it's not, what signal will you look for?
Well, firstly, increasing debt service costs are a function of increasing debt, absolutely. And over the course of the fiscal plan, as you will note, our debt servicing costs are increasing. Again, right now, we really believe that we need to focus on the job at hand. The job at hand is resourcing healthcare adequately, positioning the province for economic recovery, which is critical to fiscal recovery in the long term, and also ensuring that we're delivering government services most efficiently. That's what our focus is today. Down the road, when we have additional economic clarity and consistent with our platform commitment, I believe it would be very appropriate and important to appoint a revenue panel to test the efficiency and appropriateness of our revenue structure. But right now, we're focused on the job at hand.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Rafi Buchakanian, CBC.
Hi, thanks. Minister, in the segment about Keystone XL in the fiscal plan, we are told there was an investment of $892 million as loan guarantees. After we already knew the election result in the U.S., I understand Alberta had certain obligations towards the pipeline, but why not have any out clause in your contract, at least for that part of Alberta's share of the load?
Well, look, our exposure did not increase when we took on those loan guarantees. Our exposure changed from an equity investment to effectively a loan guarantee. We've been transparent in this fiscal plan in terms of Alberta's exposure, and that's $1.3 billion on KXL. And again, we took a calculated risk in investing in that pipeline project, a project that has incredible potential for wealth creation in the province of Alberta, generational potential, a project that would lead to an additional $30 billion in government revenues over 20 years. And right now we're working with TC Energy to understand every option available to us.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Amanda Stevenson, Calgary Herald.
Hi there, Minister. I'm just wondering if you can provide some details about this Alberta Jobs Now program. Is this a brand new program and how it works? And also, are the feds involved in this?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'll say stay tuned for the official announcement, but the Jobs Now program will be an important program that will provide on-the-job training for Albertans. And we know that's going to be critical in economic recovery, critical as we see our economy change and transition over time, as we focus on economic diversification. So stay tuned for the full announcement. Yes, there will be a federal government component to it. We're excited about the program. We believe it's an essential program, again, to ensure on-the-job training for Albertans.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
David Staples, Edmonton Journal.
Thanks for taking my question. The debt is going to be rising from $74 billion in 2019-20 to a projected $132.5 billion in 2023-24. So you guys came to government pledging fiscal conservatism, and there's plenty of fiscal conservatives in this province who are not going to be happy with that kind of increase in debt at all. You know, what would you say to that group of people who are concerned that spending has gotten out of control and doesn't look like it's going to be reined in fast enough?
Well, I would respond with a couple of points. Firstly, I'm not happy with COVID-19, having to deal with a pandemic and the resulting economic challenges of the province. But this is where we find ourselves, and we have to adjust to ensure that we're delivering the most competent, responsible government possible at a time like this. I am also very disappointed that we can't present a balanced budget in our first term, but simply put, with particularly the drastic drop in Alberta government revenues as a result of this pandemic and economic collapse, we simply can't do that. And that's why identifying fiscal anchors and using fiscal anchors will be so important in the interim. Our debt will be rising over the course of this fiscal plan, but we're pledging to keep our net debt to GDP ratio below 30%. 30% was approximately the national provincial average pre-COVID. So if we can stay below 30%, we will ensure a reasonably strong balance sheet, which will position us for fiscal recovery in the future. And again, another absolutely critical fiscal anchor is to bring our per capita spending, bring our per capita cost of delivering government services down to that of comparable provinces. That was a plan and a goal that we had in Budget 2019. That was part of our core fiscal plan and approach. We're continuing with that approach. We need to keep our eye on the ball, regardless of where oil prices go. We need to keep our eye on the ball and look to deliver government services most efficiently. So we're looking to manage what we can manage today. We're looking to ensure that we're positioned for fiscal recovery in the intermediate and long term. Part of the answer there is ensuring that we can see a disproportionate economic growth and recovery in the province. And again, that's a key point, a key priority in Budget 2021.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Lisa Johnson, Edmonton Journal.
Hi, thanks for taking my question, Minister. I'm wondering if you can put this into perspective in the 2019 budget, the government was aiming to reduce public sector spending by 7.7%. And I understand that's still the goal here, but does the increase in AHS staffing this year put a bit of a hitch in that giddy up? And will the government need to be more aggressive in the outlying years to reach that 7.7% goal? Where are we at, essentially, with that goal?
Well, right now, relative to health and AHS, we are working to ensure that health and AHS have all the resources they need to deal with the pandemic. And increasing staffing has been part of the equation. So that's the focus at this point in time. With the public service, we had a goal of reducing the size of the public service just under 8%. Actually, I can tell you this, that we are well along on that goal. In fact, there's just minimal adjustments to be made. The vast majority of changes can be made through attrition at this point in time. There is also cross-department work being done to ensure that in the public service we have staff in the right departments, considering the changes that COVID has brought with respect to priorities. So again, right now we are well on track with respect to the Alberta Public Service and our plans on right-sizing the public sector. And in terms of health, right now our priority is ensuring health is resourced and staffed to meet the pandemic.
We have time for 2 more questions. Operator, can you put through our next caller?
James Keller, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Minister. I want to go back to this idea of a structural deficit. After bringing per capita spending down and a rebound to pre-pandemic economic performance, you've still got this $8 billion hole after 3 years and really no plan to fix it. So what is the wisdom, both in terms of economic planning, but also just in selling this budget to the government, of not talking about the what else now, or at least beginning that conversation about what that might look like, particularly if it might mean looking at taxes at some point?
Sure. Well, a couple of things there. Firstly, right now is not a time to even be considering major revenue adjustments or tax increases. There is an abundance of research that would show that tax increases have a very negative effect on economic growth. In fact, in terms of fiscal adjustments, tax increases are much more harmful than spending reductions. And again, there's a great body of research to support that. What we're saying is we're looking to manage what we can manage today. And again, resourcing health for the pandemic, positioning the province for economic recovery, and working to deliver government services most efficiently, which, as you point out, gets us in alignment with other provinces by 22, 23, 23, 24. At that point in time, we will have much more economic clarity. And I think that will be a very important time then to evaluate what more do we need to do. Listen, it continues to be a high priority for this government, and I believe a high priority for Albertans to balance a budget. And at that point in time, again, it will be, I think the time will be right to evaluate our options. We can determine where we're at with our existing revenue structure. And as I pointed out in the past, I believe that it will be an important time to appoint a revenue panel to better understand the efficiency and appropriateness of our revenue structure at that time.
Operator, can you please put through our final caller?
Thank you. Tom Vernon, Global News.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for taking my question. I want to look at your economic recovery plan, the development of sector strategies, this continued push to get petrochemical investment. When do we start to see this start to bear fruit? When will we see these strategies? When will we see announcements on diversification efforts?
Well, thanks for that, Tom. Well, firstly, with respect to petrochemical investment in the province, our Associate Minister of Natural Gas has rolled out and is in the process of fine-tuning the Alberta Petrochemical Initiative program, or incentive program, pardon me. And that program is a vastly improved program over the previous PDP program that we inherited. Petrochemical manufacturing investment is an area that we believe we can be competitive in. We're looking to attract additional investment, and I can say there's interest in investment proponents in coming to the province. This is part of our overall strategy to position the province for disproportionate investment attraction and job creation.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.